1984 is a political novel written with the purpose of warning readers in the West of the dangers of totalitarian government. Having witnessed firsthand the horrific lengths to which totalitarian governments in Spain and Russia would go in order to sustain and increase their power, Orwell designed 1984 to sound the alarm in Western nations still unsure about how to approach the rise of communism. In 1949, the Cold War had not yet escalated, many American intellectuals supported communism, and the state of diplomacy between democratic and communist nations was highly ambiguous. In the American press, the Soviet Union was often portrayed as a great moral experiment. Orwell, however, was deeply disturbed by the widespread cruelties and oppressions he observed in communist countries, and seems to have been particularly concerned by the role of technology in enabling oppressive governments to monitor and control their citizens. In 1984, Orwell portrays the perfect totalitarian society, the most extreme realization imaginable of a modern-day government with absolute power. The title of the novel was meant to indicate to its readers in 1939 that the story represented a real possibility for the near future, if totalitarianism were not opposed. The title suggested, some variation of the world described in the novel could become a reality in only 35 years. Orwell portrays a state in which government monitors and controls every aspect of human life to the extent that even having a disloyal thought is against the law. As the novel progresses, the timidly rebellious Winston Smith sets out to challenge the limits of the party's power, only to discover that its ability to control and enslave its subjects dwarfs even his most paranoid conceptions of its reach. As the reader comes to understand through Winston's eyes, the party uses a number of techniques to control its citizens, each of which is an important theme of its own in the novel. These include, the party barrages its subjects with psychological stimuli designed to overwhelm the mind's capacity for independent thought. The giant telescreen in every citizen's room blasts a constant stream of propaganda designed to make the failures and shortcomings of the party appear to be triumphant successes. The telescreens also monitor behavior everywhere they go. Citizens are continuously reminded, especially by means of the omnipresent signs reading, "Big Brother is watching you," that the authorities are scrutinizing them. The party undermines family structure by inducting children into an organization called the Junior Spies, which brainwashes and encourages them to spy on their parents and report any instance of disloyalty to the party. The party also forces individuals to suppress their sexual desires, treating sex as merely a procreative duty whose end is the creation of new party members. The party then channels people's pent-up frustration and emotion into intense, ferocious displays of hatred against the party's political enemies. Many of these enemies have been invented by the party expressly for this purpose. In addition to manipulating their minds, the party also controls the bodies of its subjects. The party constantly watches for any sign of disloyalty, to the point that, as Winston observes, even a tiny facial twitch could lead to an arrest. A person's own nervous system becomes his greatest enemy. The party forces its members to undergo mass morning exercises called the physical jerks, and then to work long, grueling days at government agencies, keeping people in a general state of exhaustion. Anyone who does manage to defy the party is punished and re-educated through systematic and brutal torture. After being subjected to weeks of this intense treatment, Winston himself comes to the conclusion that nothing is more powerful than physical pain. No emotional loyalty or moral conviction can overcome it. By conditioning the minds of their victims with physical torture, the party is able to control reality, convincing its subjects that 2 + 2 = 5. The party controls every source of information, managing and rewriting the content of all newspapers and histories for its own ends. The party does not allow individuals to keep records of their past, such as photographs or documents. As a result, memories become fuzzy and unreliable, and citizens become perfectly willing to believe whatever the party tells them. By controlling the present, the party is able to manipulate the past. And in controlling the past, the party can justify all of its actions in the present. By means of telescreens and hidden microphones across the city, the party is able to monitor its members almost all of the time. Additionally, The party employs complicated mechanisms. 1984 was written in the era before computers to exert large-scale control on economic production and sources of information, and fearsome machinery to inflict torture upon those it deems enemies. 1984 reveals that technology, which is generally perceived as working toward moral good, can also facilitate the most diabolical evil. One of Orwell's most important messages in 1984 is that language is of central importance to human thought because it structures and limits the ideas that individuals are capable of formulating and expressing. If control of language were centralized in a political agency, Orwell proposes, such an agency could possibly alter the very structure of language to make it impossible to even conceive of disobedient or rebellious thoughts, because there would be no words with which to think them. This idea manifests itself in the language of Newspeak, which the party has introduced to replace English. The party is constantly refining and perfecting Newspeak, with the ultimate goal that no one will be capable of conceptualizing anything that might question the party's absolute power. Interestingly, many of Orwell's ideas about language as a controlling force have been modified by writers and critics seeking to deal with the legacy of colonialism. During colonial times, foreign powers took political and military control of distant regions and, as a part of their occupation, instituted their own language as the language of government and business. Post-colonial writers often analyze or address the damage done to local populations by the loss of language and the attendant loss of culture and historical connection. The idea of doublethink emerges as an important consequence of the party's massive campaign of large-scale psychological manipulation. Simply put, doublethink is the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in one's mind at the same time. As the party's mind control techniques break down an individual's capacity for independent thought, it becomes possible for that individual to believe anything that the party tells them, even while possessing information that runs counter to what they are being told. At the Hate Week rally, for instance, the party shifts its diplomatic allegiance, so the nation it has been at war with suddenly becomes its ally, and its former ally becomes its new enemy. When the party speaker suddenly changes the nation he refers to as an enemy in the middle of his speech, the crowd accepts his words immediately, and is ashamed to find that it has made the wrong signs for the event. In the same way, people are able to accept the party ministries' names, though they contradict their functions. The Ministry of Plenty oversees economic shortages. The Ministry of Peace wages war, the Ministry of Truth conducts propaganda and historical revisionism, and the Ministry of Love is the center of the party's operations of torture and punishment. Urban decay proves a pervasive motif in 1984. The London that Winston Smith calls home is a dilapidated, run-down city in which buildings are crumbling, conveniences such as elevators never work, and necessities such as electricity and plumbing are extremely unreliable. Though Orwell never discusses the theme openly, it is clear that the shoddy disintegration of London, just like the widespread hunger and poverty of its inhabitants, is due to the party's mismanagement and incompetence. One of the themes of 1984, inspired by the history of 20th-century communism, is that totalitarian regimes are viciously effective at enhancing their own power and miserably incompetent at providing for their citizens. The grimy urban decay in London is an important visual reminder of this idea, and offers insight into the party's priorities through its contrast to the immense technology the party develops to spy on its citizens. Throughout London, Winston sees posters showing a man gazing down over the words, "Big Brother is watching you," everywhere he goes. Big Brother is the face of the party. The citizens are told that he is the leader of the nation and the head of the party, but Winston can never determine whether or not he actually exists. In any case, the face of Big Brother symbolizes the party in its public manifestation. He is a reassurance to most people. The warmth of his name suggests his ability to protect, but he is also an open threat. One cannot escape his gaze. Big Brother also symbolizes the vagueness with which the higher ranks of the party present themselves. It is impossible to know who really rules Oceania, what life is like for the rulers, or why they act as they do. Winston thinks he remembers that Big Brother emerged around 1960, but the party's official records date Big Brother's existence back to 1930, before Winston was even born. By deliberately weakening people's memories and flooding their minds with propaganda, the party is able to replace individuals' memories with its own version of the truth. It becomes nearly impossible for people to question the party's power in the present when they accept what the party tells them about the past, that the party arose to protect them from bloated, oppressive capitalists, and that the world was far uglier and harsher before the party came to power. Winston vaguely understands this principle. He struggles to recover his own memories and formulate a larger picture of what has happened to the world. Winston buys a paperweight in an antique store in the Pearl District that comes to symbolize his attempt to reconnect with the past. Symbolically, when the thought police arrest Winston at last, the paperweight shatters on the floor. The old picture of St. Clement's Church in the room that Winston rents above Mr. Charrington's shop is another representation of the lost past. Winston associates a song with the picture that ends with the words, "Here comes the chopper to chop off your head." This is an important foreshadow, as it is the telescreen hidden behind the picture that ultimately leads the thought police to Winston, symbolizing the party's corrupt control of the past. Throughout the novel, Winston imagines meeting O'Brien in the place where there is no darkness. The words first come to him in a dream, and he ponders them for the rest of the novel. Eventually, Winston does meet O'Brien in the place where there is no darkness. Instead of being the paradise Winston imagined, it is merely a prison cell in which the light is never turned off. The idea of the place where there is no darkness symbolizes Winston's approach to the future. Possibly because of his intense fatalism, he believes that he is doomed no matter what he does. He unwisely allows himself to trust O'Brien, even though inwardly he senses that O'Brien might be a party operative.